The morning mist clings to the cobblestones of Rome's slave market as Lady Valeria Maxima steps from her covered litter. Her silk veil conceals noble features, but nothing can hide the shock rippling through the crowd when she approaches the auction block. Chained before them stands a mountain of a man, his scarred hands bound in iron, his face hidden beneath a leather hood that speaks of either shame or dangerous secrets. The auctioneer's voice cuts through dawn's silence as he presents the gladiator whose name strikes fear into the hearts of Rome's citizens. Some whisper he's the undefeated champion of the Colosseum. Others claim he's a beast who killed his own master. But when Valeria raises her hand to claim him with a bid that silences every tongue in the marketplace, she sets in motion events that will shake the very foundations of the empire. What deadly secret lies beneath that hood that's worth risking everything? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wheels of Valeria's cart crunch against the gravel path leading to her family's villa, nestled among the rolling hills outside Rome's walls. Olive groves stretch in neat rows toward the horizon, their silver-green leaves catching the morning light. Behind her, chained in the cart's bed, the hooded gladiator sits in silence, his massive frame making the sturdy wooden vehicle creak with each bump in the road. Valeria's fingers trace the cold metal of her father's signet ring, heavy on a chain around her neck. The golden eagle carved into its surface represents Senator Marcus Maximus's authority in the Roman Senate, a power that has protected their family for decades. Yet today, as she brings this dangerous stranger to their home, she wonders if that protection will be enough for what she plans to do. The villa's red-tiled roof comes into view, and with it, the questioning faces of the household staff. Gaius, her father's most trusted freedman, hurries down the marble steps. His weathered face, marked by 30 years of loyal service, shows concern as he takes in the chained figure. "My lady," Gaius calls out, his voice carrying the careful tone he uses when diplomatic words are needed. "Your father is attending to Senate business in the city. Perhaps we should wait for his return before." "Help me get him to the slave quarters," Valeria interrupts, stepping down from the cart with practiced grace. Her stola, dyed the deep purple reserved for the senatorial class, flows around her as she moves. "Prepare the cell in the east wing. The one with the heavy door." Gaius hesitates, his dark eyes studying the gladiator. Even sitting, the man towers above them. Scars crisscross his exposed arms like a map of battles fought and survived. The leather hood obscures his features completely, held in place by iron buckles that speak of serious precautions taken by his previous owners. "My lady, perhaps you could explain why you've purchased." Gaius pauses, searching for diplomatic words. "Why you've acquired such a formidable slave without consulting your father." "Because some decisions cannot wait for committee approval," Valeria replies, her voice carrying an edge that surprises even her. "This man has information I need. Information about my brother's death." The mention of Lucius's name changes the atmosphere immediately. Gaius's expression softens with old grief. Lucius Maximus had been the pride of their family, a young tribune destined for greatness until a barbarian raid claimed his life 3 years ago. The official reports spoke of heroic sacrifice, but Valeria has never believed the stories. Too many details didn't align. Too many witnesses had conflicting accounts. What could a gladiator possibly know about Tribune Lucius? Gaius asks, but his tone has shifted from concern to curiosity. "That remains to be discovered," Valeria says, watching as 2 stable hands approach the cart cautiously. The gladiator hasn't moved or spoken since leaving the market, but there's an alertness in his posture that suggests he's listening to every word. Brutus, the villa's steward, emerges from the main house with his usual expression of controlled disapproval. A thin man with calculating eyes, he's managed the estate's finances for 15 years with meticulous attention to detail and an unfortunate tendency to question every expense. "Lady Valeria," Brutus says, his nasal voice carrying across the courtyard. "I trust you have documentation for this purchase? The household accounts will need proper recording, and there are tax implications for acquiring gladiatorial property." "The documentation will be provided when needed," Valeria replies coldly. She's never liked Brutus, finding his constant focus on money rather than people distasteful, though she acknowledges his value to the estate's operation. As the stable hands help the chained gladiator down from the cart, his size becomes even more apparent. He stands nearly 7 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. The simple tunic he wears shows signs of quality beneath the grime, cut from cloth finer than typical slave garments. Someone had money invested in this man's appearance, at least initially. The procession moves slowly toward the east wing, where the most secure slave quarters are located. The gladiator's chains clink with each step, but he moves with surprising grace for someone so large. There's something in his bearing, even bound and hooded, that speaks of nobility rather than servitude. Valeria follows behind, her mind racing through the questions she plans to ask once they're alone. The leather hood conceals more than just a face. It hides the key to a mystery that has consumed her thoughts for 3 years. Every lead about her brother's true fate has led to dead ends and official silence. But yesterday, in a tavern frequented by retired gladiators, she heard whispers of a fighter who spoke of military campaigns in Germania, who knew details about the battle where Lucius died. Finding that fighter had led her to this morning's auction, to a purchase that would either provide the answers she seeks or destroy everything her family has built. The signet ring grows heavier against her chest as they reach the cell door, its weight a reminder of the power and responsibility she's inherited. The gladiator enters his prison without resistance, settling onto the simple wooden bench as if he's done this countless times before. Only when the iron door clangs shut does Valeria allow herself to wonder if she's made a terrible mistake. The afternoon sun streams through the narrow window of the east wing cell, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Valeria stands outside the iron bars, studying the hooded figure who sits motionless on the wooden bench. For an hour, she has tried various approaches to begin conversation, but the gladiator remains as silent as marble. "I know you can hear me," she says, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "The tavern keeper told me you spoke of Germania, of battles fought 3 summers past. I need to know what you witnessed there." Still no response. The leather hood turns slightly toward her voice, but the man beneath remains mute. Valeria reaches through the bars and places a clay cup of wine on the small shelf built into the cell wall. The gesture is met with continued silence, but she notices his posture shift slightly at the sound of liquid being poured. "My brother died in Germania," she continues, settling onto a stone stool placed outside the cell for guard duty. "Tribune Lucius Maximus. The reports said he fell heroically leading a charge against barbarian raiders. But something about those reports never felt true. This time, the hooded head turns more distinctly in her direction. Progress, perhaps? The details kept changing. First, he died at dawn. Then at sunset. The location of the battle shifted with each telling. The number of enemy casualties varied wildly between accounts. Valeria's voice grows harder as she speaks. Someone crafted those lies very carefully, but they weren't careful enough. She pulls a broken piece of metal from her cloak, the remains of a gladius hilt, its bronze grip worn smooth by countless hands. Hidden beneath loose stones in the cell's corner during her inspection earlier, this artifact had confirmed her suspicions about the gladiator's true identity. "I found this in your cell," she says, holding the broken hilt where he can see it. "Roman military issue, officer grade. The kind carried by a legion commander, not a common soldier. Certainly not by a gladiator born to slavery." The reaction is immediate and unmistakable. The gladiator's entire body tenses, his chained hands clenching into fists. For the first time since the auction, he shows emotion. "Who are you?" Valeria asks quietly. "What really happened in Germania?" The silence stretches for long minutes. Then, slowly, the gladiator reaches for the wine cup. His movements are deliberate, controlled, nothing like the animalistic behavior expected from arena fighters. When he speaks, his voice is cultured, educated, bearing the crisp accent of Rome's patrician class. "Lady Valeria Maxima," he says, the words carefully measured. "Daughter of Senator Marcus Maximus. Sister to the late Tribune Lucius Maximus. You seek answers to questions that could destroy you. The shock of hearing her full name and lineage spoken with such precise knowledge leaves Valeria momentarily speechless. This is no ordinary gladiator. How do you know who I am? She manages to ask. Because I knew your brother, the gladiator replies. I was there when he died. And I know who ordered his death. Valeria's heart pounds against her ribs. 3 years of searching, of following whispered rumors and half-remembered stories, and she's finally found someone who was present at Lucius's final moments. Tell me what happened, she demands, leaning closer to the bars. Your brother discovered something he wasn't meant to know. A conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Roman power. Senator Gaius Cassius Corvus was selling information to Germanic tribes, telling them exactly where and when Roman patrols would be most vulnerable. The name hits Valeria like a physical blow. Corvus, her father's colleague, a man who dined at their table, who had comforted the family after Lucius's death, who had recently begun suggesting that Valeria should consider marriage to his son. Lucius found evidence of the betrayal, the gladiator continues. Communications between Corvus and barbarian chieftains. He was preparing to present the proof to Emperor Trajan when Corvus learned of the discovery. So Corvus had him killed, Valeria whispers, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. Corvus arranged for Lucius to lead a patrol into an ambush. But your brother suspected the trap. He sent most of his men by a different route and took only a small group to investigate the suspicious orders. The gladiator pauses, and Valeria can hear the weight of memory in his silence. I was commanding the cavalry support for his unit. When we realized we were walking into a trap, Lucius ordered me to escape and carry word back to Rome. He stayed to buy time for the retreat, knowing it meant his death. But you never made it back to Rome, Valeria observes, studying the chains that bind him. Corvus's agents were waiting on every road. They captured me before I could reach the capital, reported me dead along with your brother. I've spent 3 years in gladiator schools, winning fights to stay alive, waiting for a chance to expose the truth. And now I've bought you, Valeria says, understanding the irony. Corvus's enemy, delivered directly to his political ally's household. Unless, the gladiator says, raising his head to look directly at her through the leather hood, his political ally is willing to become his enemy. The evening shadows lengthen across the cell floor as Valeria makes her decision. She produces a small iron key from her cloak, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocks the cell door. The gladiator watches her approach with wary stillness, his massive frame coiled with potential energy despite the chains. If I remove your hood, she says, her voice barely above a whisper, will you try to harm me? I have never harmed an innocent person, my lady. I will not start with the sister of the man I failed to save. Valeria steps closer, close enough to smell the leather and metal scent that clings to him. Her fingers work at the iron buckles that hold the hood in place, each one clicking open with mechanical precision. When the last buckle releases, she pulls the leather away and steps back, gasping at what she sees. The face before her is scarred but unmistakably noble, with the strong jaw and intelligent eyes of Roman aristocracy. But it's the recognition that strikes her like lightning. She knows this face from marble busts and painted portraits. Marcus Aurelius Maxentius, the legendary general who conquered Gaul, who held the Rhine frontier against barbarian invasions for 5 years. The man officially declared dead in the battle that claimed her brother. Jupiter's beard, she breathes. You're Marcus Maxentius. The Senate erected statues in your honor. My father spoke your name with reverence. Marcus's expression remains grim despite his unveiled face. Your father spoke the name of a dead man. Marcus Maxentius died in Germania, betrayed by the corruption he tried to expose. What sits before you is merely a gladiator who fights to survive each day. Valeria studies his features, seeing past the arena scars to the commander who once stood beside emperors. The reports said you fell leading the final charge, that your body was lost. In the river. Corvus needed me declared dead to prevent any investigation into what really happened. When his agents captured me, he had a choice: kill me outright or find a way to profit from keeping me alive. Marcus rattles his chains bitterly. He chose profit. A famous general brings high prices in the gladiator markets. From beneath his rough tunic, Marcus produces a torn piece of red cloth, a fragment of a military banner bearing the eagle standard of the 10th Legion. The fabric is stained with old blood and worn thin from years of careful preservation. I tore this from our standard before the ambush, he explains, holding the fragment like a sacred relic. It's the only proof that remains of what we discovered about Corvus's betrayal. He's been selling Roman military intelligence to barbarian tribes for years, growing rich while our soldiers die in carefully orchestrated massacres. Valeria takes the banner fragment with reverent hands. The red dye has faded to rust brown, but the gold threading that outlines the eagle still catches the lamplight. How many others died because of his treachery? Hundreds. Perhaps thousands. Each heroic last stand he orchestrated filled his coffers while emptying Roman graves. Marcus's voice carries the weight of survivor's guilt. Your brother died because he was too honorable to let such evil continue. And you've carried this knowledge for 3 years while fighting for the entertainment of crowds who cheer for the death of a hero. I've stayed alive for 3 years waiting for someone to listen. Someone with the power to act on the truth. Valeria moves to the cell window, looking out at the olive groves her family has tended for generations. Everything she believed about recent events has been shattered and rebuilt in the span of an afternoon. Corvus, the family friend who comforted them through grief, who suggested she consider marriage to his son Lucius, the same man who orchestrated her brother's murder. What evidence do you have beyond your word and this banner fragment? She asks. Hidden among Corvus's possessions are letters from barbarian chiefs, payments records, maps marking planned ambush sites. But they're concealed behind false walls and secret compartments. Finding them would require access to his private quarters, which would require either breaking into a senator's home or being invited as a trusted guest. Exactly. And since Corvus believes me dead and you ignorant, we have advantages he doesn't expect. Valeria turns back to face him, seeing not the chained gladiator but the brilliant military commander who once outmaneuvered entire barbarian armies. If we expose him, he won't simply accept defeat. He'll try to destroy us first. He's already destroyed us both, my lady. The question is whether we'll let him enjoy his victory or make him pay for it. The weight of decision settles on her shoulders like a marble cloak. Her comfortable life, her family's political standing, even her personal safety, all will be at risk if she chooses to pursue this path. But the alternative is allowing her brother's murderer to continue profiting from Roman blood. What do you need from me? She asks. Time, access, and trust. Can you provide all 3? I can provide the first 2. The third you'll have to earn. Marcus nods respectfully. Then we begin tomorrow. The next morning arrives with an unwelcome surprise. Valeria is breaking her fast in the garden when Gaius approaches with barely concealed anxiety etched across his weathered features. My lady, Senator Corvus approaches with an escort. His litter should reach the villa within minutes. Valeria's blood turns to ice water. Did he send word ahead? Is my father expecting him? No advance notice, my lady. This appears to be an unannounced visit. Through the morning mist, she can already see the approaching procession, 8 litter-bearers carrying an ornate sedan chair decorated with senatorial purple, flanked by a dozen armed guards in gleaming armor. Such a display of force is unusual for a friendly social call. Quickly, Valeria commands, rising from her stone bench. Ensure the east wing is secured. No one enters those quarters without my explicit permission. Tell Marcus to remain absolutely silent, no matter what he hears. She barely has time to compose herself before Corvus arrives. As his bearers lower the litter, she studies the man who murdered her brother with fresh eyes. Tall and patrician, with silver hair perfectly arranged and clothing that costs more than most citizens earn in a year, he embodies Roman authority. But now she notices details that escaped her before, the calculating coldness in his dark eyes, the way his fingers rest constantly on an ornate silver ring that seems designed for more than decoration. Lady Valeria, Corvus says, stepping from his litter with practiced grace. How lovely to find you enjoying this beautiful morning. I trust you are well? Senator Corvus, she replies, offering the formal bow required by protocol. This is an unexpected pleasure. My father is attending to business in the city. Actually, my dear, I've come to speak with you specifically. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. I understand you made an interesting purchase at yesterday's slave market. The statement lands like a sword thrust. Somehow, impossibly, he already knows about Marcus. I occasionally acquire household slaves, she says carefully. Is there something specific about my purchase that concerns you? A gladiator, I'm told. A particularly large and dangerous one. Such acquisitions are unusual for a young woman of your station. He moves closer, and she catches the scent of expensive oils that cannot quite mask something predatory beneath. I worry about your safety. Your concern is appreciated but unnecessary. The slave is properly secured. Corvus's fingers turn his silver ring, a nervous habit she's now certain conceals something more sinister. The ring's surface appears smooth, but she notices a tiny mechanism that could be triggered by pressure, a hidden compartment perfect for concealing poison. Valeria, my child, he says, his tone shifting to paternal warmth that makes her skin crawl. Perhaps it's time we discussed your future more seriously. Rome is dangerous for unprotected women, especially those of your family's prominence. I hardly consider myself unprotected, Senator. Your father's influence has limits. Political winds shift constantly in our great city. Alliances that seem permanent can crumble overnight. His meaning is unmistakably threatening. A woman needs the security that comes from marriage to a powerful family. Are you suggesting I should consider your son Lucius as a potential husband? I'm suggesting that such a union would benefit both our houses. My son is smitten with you, as you surely know. A formal betrothal would ensure your protection against any future uncertainties. The audacity of the proposal leaves Valeria momentarily speechless. The man who orchestrated her brother's murder now wants to bind their families through marriage, probably to gain better access to her father's political secrets. Such an important decision requires considerable thought, she manages to say. Of course, but I hope you won't think too long. Opportunities for advantageous marriages don't remain available indefinitely. The threat in his words is barely veiled now. And I would hate for any misfortune to befall you while you deliberate. From the east wing comes the faint sound of chains moving against stone. Corvus's head turns sharply toward the noise, his eyes narrowing with sudden suspicion. What was that sound? Kitchen slaves preparing the midday meal, Valeria lies smoothly. The east wing houses are food preparation areas. But Corvus is already moving toward the sound, his guards following close behind. Perhaps I should inspect your new acquisition while I'm here. Ensure he's properly secured for everyone's safety. Panic floods Valeria's mind as she realizes Corvus is heading directly toward Marcus's cell. If he recognizes the man he thought safely dead, both their lives will be forfeit within moments. Senator, surely such an inspection is beneath your dignity, she says, hurrying to intercept him. On the contrary, my dear. I take a personal interest in anything that might threaten the well-being of future family members. They reach the corridor leading to the secure cells. Through the iron bars, Marcus sits in shadow, his face turned away from the light. But even in silhouette, his massive frame and distinctive posture are unmistakable to anyone who knew him in life. Corvus stops dead in his tracks, his face going pale as marble. Impossible, he whispers, his hand moving instinctively to his poison ring. You're supposed to be dead. Marcus rises slowly from the stone bench, his chains clanking in the sudden silence. Even bound and imprisoned, his presence fills the corridor with the unmistakable authority of a born commander. Corvus's guards shift nervously, hands moving instinctively toward their sword hilts. Senator Gaius Cassius Corvus, Marcus says, his voice carrying across the space like a death sentence. Still wearing that ring, I see. The one filled with nightshade extract, your preferred method for eliminating inconvenient witnesses. Corvus's face cycles through shock, fear, and calculation before settling on cold rage. You should have stayed dead, Marcus. It would have been so much simpler for everyone. Simpler for you, perhaps. Less convenient for the families of the soldiers you've murdered. Guards, Corvus snaps. Arrest this escaped slave for threatening a senator. But Valeria steps between them, her voice ringing with aristocratic authority. This man is my legal property, purchased in open market with proper documentation. You have no jurisdiction over my household slaves. Your property is a dead man who should be executed for treason. Then produce the evidence of his crimes, Valeria challenges. Present witnesses to his supposed treason. Show the Senate proof of your accusations. The standoff stretches taut as a bowstring. Corvus clearly wants to act but recognizes the legal constraints. Killing Marcus on Valeria's property without evidence would create exactly the kind of scandal that might expose his other crimes. Very well, he says finally. But understand this, my dear child. Harboring dangerous fugitives makes you complicit in their crimes. Your father's protection has limits. After Corvus departs with his guards, Valeria and Marcus huddle in the villa's secure study. Ancient scrolls of military strategy cover the walls, texts that belonged to her grandfather, a veteran of the Gallic campaigns. Among these dusty treatises, they begin planning their survival. He'll move against us quickly now, Marcus warns, unrolling a scroll that details battlefield communications tactics. Corvus has spent too many years building his network to let two witnesses destroy it. What are our advantages? Valeria asks, studying the military diagrams with new purpose. He thinks I've been isolated for 3 years with no opportunity to gather allies. He's wrong. Marcus traces patterns on the strategy scrolls, his finger following ancient battle formations. Other victims of his schemes have survived. Other families have suffered losses that never quite made sense. You mean there are others who know the truth? Fragments of truth. Suspicions. Pieces of a larger puzzle that Corvus thought he'd scattered beyond reconstruction. Marcus looks up from the scrolls. Your brother wasn't his first victim or his last. There's a network of survivors, soldiers who escaped ambushes, merchants who lost caravans to conveniently informed raiders, senators who died mysteriously after asking uncomfortable questions. Valeria feels a spark of hope for the first time since this ordeal began. Can you contact these people? Some of them. But it requires careful communication. Corvus has informants throughout Rome. One wrong message could expose everyone. They spend the afternoon developing their strategy, using principles drawn from the ancient military texts. Marcus explains how successful commanders coordinate multiple forces against superior enemies. Patience, misdirection, and striking only when victory is certain. We need 3 things, he says, pointing to a diagram showing troop movements. Evidence that proves the conspiracy, allies who can protect us while we gather it, and a way to present our findings that Corvus can't suppress. The evidence is hidden in his villa. The allies were building slowly. But the third requirement. The emperor, Marcus says simply. Trajan is the only authority in Rome that Corvus can't buy or intimidate. If we can place proof directly in his hands, publicly, Corvus loses all his power to silence us. Getting an audience with the emperor isn't simple, even for a senator's daughter. No, but there are occasions when he appears publicly. Gladiatorial games, religious festivals, Senate sessions. Opportunities for a dramatic revelation that he can't ignore. As evening shadows lengthen across the study, they hear footsteps approaching. Gaius appears in the doorway, his expression more grave than usual. My lady, I've just returned from the city. Disturbing news travels ahead of me. What kind of news? Senator Corvus has filed formal complaints with the urban praetor, claiming your gladiator is an escaped criminal with a history of violence against Roman citizens. He's demanding immediate confiscation of your dangerous property. The legal web is closing around them faster than expected. How long do we have? Marcus asks. The praetor will send investigators tomorrow morning. If they find grounds for Corvus's claims. Gaius leaves the sentence unfinished. Then tonight becomes crucial, Valeria says, her mind racing through possibilities. Marcus, can your network be contacted immediately? Some of them. Former soldiers respond quickly to urgent summons. Then send word tonight. Tell them to gather evidence, prepare testimonies, ready themselves for open confrontation. She looks between Marcus and Gaius, seeing the same determination in both faces. If Corvus wants to force this conflict into the open, we'll give him exactly what he's asking for. The Colosseum roars with 50,000 voices as the morning games reach their climax. From her seat in the imperial box, Valeria watches Marcus enter the arena with a mixture of terror and pride. The plan they devised requires him to fight publicly, to demonstrate that he's truly the gladiator she claims to own, but every moment he spends on the sand brings him closer to death. His armor gleams in the harsh sunlight, bronze plates over leather, a gladius at his side, and on his head, a laurel crown of golden leaves. The crown marks him as a champion, winner of over 50 arena contests, and serves as both protection and proclamation. To the crowd, it announces his status as an elite fighter. To the growing network of allies hidden throughout the stands, it signals that Marcus Maxentius lives. Your gladiator fights well, Emperor Trajan observes from the throne beside her. The aging ruler's keen eyes miss nothing, and Valeria wonders how much he suspects about her true motives. Where did you acquire such a specimen? The slave markets, Caesar. Sometimes one finds unexpected treasures among the condemned. 3 opponents enter from the opposite gate, criminals sentenced to death, given weapons and a chance at freedom if they can defeat the champion. It's meant to be entertainment, but Corvus has clearly arranged for these particular criminals to receive special training and superior equipment. The first attacker comes fast, a Germanic tribesman with a battle axe and nothing to lose. Marcus sidesteps the wild swing and responds with economical precision, his gladius finding the gap between armor plates. The barbarian falls, and the crowd cheers, but 2 opponents remain. Magnificent, calls Senator Corvus from his position 3 seats away. Such skill is rare among the gladiator class. One wonders where he learned such refined techniques. The comic carries obvious menace. Corvus is publicly questioning Marcus's background, laying groundwork for later accusations. The second opponent attacks more cautiously, a Roman deserter with military training. He recognizes Marcus's fighting style immediately, and his eyes widen with shock. For a moment, their blades lock, and Valeria can see the deserter mouth a single word, "General." Marcus nods almost imperceptibly, then presses his attack. But instead of killing the man, he disarms him with a complex maneuver that demonstrates superior skill while allowing his opponent to yield honorably. The crowd appreciates the mercy, but more importantly, another witness to Marcus's survival spreads through the arena. The final opponent is the most dangerous, a gladiator from Corvus's own stable, a man-mountain called Taurus who has killed dozens in these same sands. As they circle each other warily, Valeria notices something that makes her blood freeze. Taurus carries a small vial attached to his belt, and his blade glistens with moisture that isn't sweat. Poison. Corvus has equipped his fighter with venomed weapons. She wants to scream a warning, but doing so would expose her connection to Marcus beyond what a simple owner should feel. Instead, she grips the marble railing and watches in agony as Taurus launches his assault. The poisoned blade whistles through the air where Marcus's head was a heartbeat before. Marcus has seen the venom too and adjusts his tactics accordingly, staying well clear of any contact with the tainted steel. The fight becomes a deadly dance, Taurus pressing forward with poison strikes while Marcus retreats and counters when opportunities arise. Your gladiator seems unusually cautious, Corvus observes loudly. Perhaps he fears facing a true warrior? The crowd begins to murmur agreement. Arena spectators expect aggressive combat, not careful maneuvering. But Marcus ignores the growing disapproval, waiting for his moment. It comes when Taurus overextends during a massive overhead swing. Marcus steps inside the attack, drives his pommel into his opponent's wrist, and sends the poisoned gladius spinning away across the sand. Before Taurus can react, Marcus's blade is at his throat. Yield, Marcus commands, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent arena. Never, Taurus snarls, reaching for the poison vial. Marcus's gladius moves like lightning, and Taurus falls to the sand, his hand inches from the deadly chemicals. The crowd explodes in approval, but Valeria barely hears them. What matters is the reaction spreading through specific sections of the stands, veterans and former soldiers who recognize the fighting techniques of Marcus Maxentius, men who thought their commanding officer dead, now realizing he lives. Truly exceptional, Emperor Trajan says, rising from his throne. Such a gladiator deserves proper recognition. He removes his own laurel crown, a circlet of pure gold worth a fortune, and signals for it to be presented to Marcus. The gesture is unprecedented, marking Marcus as a fighter under imperial protection. As the golden crown is placed on Marcus's head, Valeria sees Corvus's face turn ashen. The senator has just watched his attempt to murder Marcus fail spectacularly, while the emperor himself grants the Gladiator a status that makes future assassination attempts virtually impossible. Marcus raises his gladius in salute to the imperial box, but his eyes find Valeria's, and she sees the message there. The first phase of their plan has succeeded. Word of his survival will spread throughout Rome's veteran community within hours. The imperial summons arrives at dawn, carried by a Praetorian guard whose polished armor reflects the morning sun like a mirror. Valeria reads the message twice, her hands trembling slightly as she absorbs its implications. Emperor Trajan requests her presence at the palace immediately to discuss her exceptional gladiator acquisition. Gaius helps her select appropriate attire for an imperial audience, a stola of deep blue silk with gold threading, jewelry that displays wealth without ostentation, and a cloak fastened with her family's ancestral brooch. Every detail must communicate respect for imperial authority while maintaining her own dignified status. Remember, Marcus warns from his cell as she prepares to depart, Trajan is no fool. He survived 30 years of palace intrigue by reading people better than they read themselves. Tell him only truth, but not necessarily all of it. The imperial palace overwhelms the senses with its calculated magnificence. Marble columns soar toward gilded ceilings, frescoes depict Rome's greatest victories, and the air itself seems thick with power. Valeria follows a silent slave through corridors where senators and foreign ambassadors wait for audiences, their faces masks of diplomatic composure. Emperor Trajan receives her in his private study rather than the formal throne room, a significant gesture that suggests informal conversation rather than official interrogation. At 63, he remains vigorous, his gray hair closely cropped in military fashion, his bearing that of a soldier who earned his crown through conquest rather than inheritance. Lady Valeria, he says, rising from behind a desk covered with military reports and administrative scrolls. Please sit. I trust your gladiator recovered well from yesterday's performance. Caesar. He suffered only minor wounds. Remarkable fighting technique. Where did you say you acquired him? The question carries weight beyond casual curiosity. Trajan's dark eyes study her face intently, searching for deception or hidden knowledge. The slave markets, Caesar. Though I confess his background intrigues me as much as it apparently intrigues you. Intriguing indeed. His style reminds me of certain military commanders I've known. Precision, tactical thinking, economy of motion. He moves to a window overlooking the palace gardens. Such skills aren't typically found among common gladiators. Behind the emperor, Valeria notices a golden seal resting on his desk, the imperial signet used to authenticate the most important documents in the empire. The sight of it reminds her that this seemingly casual conversation could determine not just her fate, but the future of their entire conspiracy against Corvus. Caesar, may I speak freely? I encourage it. Honest conversation is rarer than precious gems in these halls. My gladiator has spoken of military service before his enslavement. He mentions battles in Germania, knowledge of tactics that suggests experience rather than training. Trajan turns back to her, his expression sharpening. What else has he told you about Germania? This is the moment that will define everything. Valeria takes a careful breath and steps onto the knife's edge between truth and treason. He speaks of corruption among the officer class. Soldiers betrayed by their own commanders. Information sold to enemies for personal profit. The emperor's stillness becomes absolute. When he speaks again, his voice carries the authority that conquered Dacia and expanded Roman borders to their greatest extent. These are serious accusations. Does your gladiator have evidence to support such claims? He claims to possess knowledge that could expose the guilty parties. But Caesar, such revelations might implicate prominent citizens. Lady Valeria, I have ruled this empire for 18 years. I have faced barbarian armies, senatorial conspiracies, and palace revolts. Do you believe I fear prominent citizens more than I value Roman lives? The force of his personality fills the room like a presence. This is not just an emperor but a commander who led from the front lines, who earned the loyalty of his legions through shared hardship and victory. No, Caesar. But I fear for my safety and that of my family if certain parties learn of our conversation. Then perhaps it's time certain parties learned that their activities have come to imperial attention. He moves to his desk and places his hand on the golden seal. I want to meet your gladiator. Privately. Tonight. Caesar, removing him from my villa might alert those we seek to expose. Then I will come to you. A private visit to inspect your household's security arrangements. Such inspections aren't unusual for properties owned by senatorial families. The implications stagger her. The Emperor of Rome, offering to visit her family's modest villa to meet a gladiator who might expose corruption at the highest levels of government. Caesar, the honor would be overwhelming. The honor will be mine if your gladiator's information proves valuable. Rome has lost too many good soldiers to mysterious ambushes and convenient betrayals. His expression darkens with old anger. If corruption has infected my officer corps, I want every guilty party identified and punished. As Valeria prepares to leave, Trajan adds one final instruction that chills her blood. Lady Valeria, tell no one of our conversation. Trust no one with knowledge of tonight's visit. In my experience, the guilty parties in such conspiracies often hide behind the most respectable facades. Evening settles over the villa like a silk veil as Valeria makes her way to the east wing. The emperor's visit weighs heavily on her mind, but another concern has grown equally pressing: her feelings for the man she purchased as property but has come to see as something far more complex. Marcus sits by the narrow window, moonlight casting shadows across his scarred features. The arena wounds from his public performance are healing well, but she notices how he favors his left shoulder where Taurus's blade came dangerously close to finding flesh. Let me tend those injuries properly, she says, carrying a basin of warm water and clean cloth into the cell. My lady, such care isn't necessary. I've survived worse with less attention. Don't call me my lady when we're alone, she says quietly, setting down the basin and beginning to clean a cut along his forearm. My name is Valeria. The intimacy of the moment surprises them both. Her fingers work gently at cleaning dried blood, and she's acutely aware of the strength in the muscles beneath her touch. These are hands that once commanded legions, arms that held a general's baton, shoulders that carried the weight of Roman expansion into barbarian lands. This is dangerous, Marcus says softly, but he doesn't pull away from her ministrations. Everything about our situation is dangerous. What's one more risk? The risk of caring too much. Of letting emotion cloud judgment when clear thinking means survival. She looks up to find his eyes studying her face with an intensity that makes her breath catch. Is that what's happening? Are you caring too much? I cared too much the moment you removed my hood and I saw compassion instead of fear in your eyes. I cared too much when you chose to believe my story rather than dismiss it as the ravings of a desperate slave. Valeria reaches into her cloak and withdraws a delicate silver bracelet, worn smooth by generations of wear. The piece belonged to her mother, given to her grandmother on her wedding day, a symbol of love that endures beyond death. My mother wore this for 30 years, she says, turning the bracelet in the lamplight. Even after my father died, she never removed it. She said true love leaves marks that time cannot erase. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm beginning to understand what she meant. Valeria's voice drops to a whisper. And because I'm terrified that understanding it will destroy us both. Marcus reaches up and cups her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. Valeria, I am a dead man walking. My name is carved on monuments to the fallen. My estate was confiscated and distributed among Corvus's allies. Even if we expose his crimes, even if we survive what's coming, I have nothing to offer you. You have yourself. Your honor, your courage, your strength. Those aren't possessions that can be confiscated or redistributed. A senator's daughter cannot love a gladiator. Rome would never accept such a union. Rome accepts what the emperor permits. And after tonight, if Trajan believes our evidence, you may find your true status restored. The possibility hangs between them, fragile as spun glass. Marcus's resurrection would solve many problems while creating entirely new ones. Even if my name were cleared, even if my property restored, what we've shared changes everything. You've seen me chained, helpless, dependent on your mercy for survival. How does a man build a life with a woman who saved him from death? The same way a woman builds a life with a man who showed her what courage truly means. Their faces are inches apart now, and Valeria can feel the warmth of his breath against her skin. Every rational thought screams warnings about the impossibility of their situation, but her heart has moved beyond rational thought. When this is over, she whispers, when Corvus is exposed and justice served, will you stay? Will you choose a life here with me, despite everything that makes it complicated? If we survive what's coming, if the gods grant us that much mercy, then yes. I will stay. I will choose you over every practical consideration, every social expectation, every reasonable objection. The kiss that follows is soft, tentative, filled with the knowledge that it might be their last moment of peace before the storm that's gathering around them breaks in full fury. When they part, Valeria rests her forehead against his, breathing in the scent of leather and steel that clings to his skin. The emperor comes tonight, she says. After he hears your testimony, there will be no hiding, no pretending, no turning back. Then we face whatever comes together. Outside, footsteps echo across the courtyard. Lucius Corvus, the senator's son, has arrived for his promised courtship visit, unaware that the woman he seeks to marry has just pledged her heart to the man his father tried to murder. The attack comes in the darkest hour before dawn, when even the villa's watchmen struggle against sleep. Valeria jerks awake to the sound of clashing steel echoing from the east wing, followed by Marcus's voice raised in combat fury. She throws on her cloak and races through moonlit corridors, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. Behind her, she hears Gaius shouting orders to the household guards, but she reaches Marcus's cell first and finds chaos. 3 black-clad assassins lie motionless on the stone floor, their blood pooling in the lamplight. Marcus stands over them, breathing hard, his chain somehow broken and a blood-stained dagger gripped in his fist. The weapon is ornate, its hilt decorated with a serpent design she recognizes, the mark of Corvus's personal guard. How many more? Marcus asks, scanning the corridor for additional threats. I don't know. The attack woke me. She kneels beside the nearest assassin, studying his equipment. Professional killers. Expensive ones. Corvus's patience has run out. He knows the Emperor suspects something after your audience yesterday. Marcus examines the dagger more closely, wiping blood from its blade to reveal intricate engravings. The steel bears traces of a dark stain along its edge, not blood, but something more sinister. Poison, he confirms grimly. Even a minor cut from this blade would have killed me within minutes. How did you break free of the chains? Weakened the links over weeks of careful work. Corvus's assassins weren't expecting resistance from a properly secured prisoner. Gaius arrives with 4 household guards, all armed and alert. His experienced eyes take in the scene instantly, the dead assassins, Marcus's freedom, the evidence of deadly intent. My lady, we must assume there are more attackers. The villa isn't secure. Then we make it secure, Valeria decides. Marcus, you're no longer a prisoner. Consider yourself a guest under our protection. Lady Valeria, one of the guards protests, releasing a gladiator slave without proper documentation will be the least of our legal problems if Senator Corvus succeeds in murdering us all, she cuts him off sharply. Marcus moves to the window, studying the grounds outside with a soldier's tactical eye. They came over the east wall, probably left horses hidden in the olive grove. Professional approach, but they underestimated their target. What do we do now? Gaius asks. We prepare for the next attack, Marcus replies, his mind already working through defensive strategies. Corvus won't accept failure quietly. He'll escalate until we're all dead or he's exposed. As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoes across the courtyard. But instead of attackers, a lone rider approaches under a banner of imperial purple. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, the Praetorian Guard's armor gleams with unmistakable authority. Message from Caesar, the guard announces, dismounting with crisp military precision. The emperor's visit is moved to immediate. He comes within the hour. The timing feels like divine intervention, but Valeria wonders if it's already too late. Corvus's assassins have failed, but their attack confirms that the senator knows about her connection to Marcus and her visit to the palace. We need to clean this up before the emperor arrives, she says, gesturing to the bodies. No, Marcus countermands. Leave them exactly as they are. Trajan needs to see the evidence of Corvus's desperation. Evidence of what? 3 dead men could have been common thieves. Marcus shows her the poisoned dagger again, pointing to specific details she missed in the initial chaos. This blade is marked with Corvus's personal seal. These men wear leather armor stamped with his household mark. And this. He lifts a small scroll from one assassin's belt, unrolling it carefully to reveal written orders in Corvus's own handwriting. Eliminate both targets. Make it appear as Gladiator rebellion. Blame the girl's carelessness. He signed his own name to a murder contract. Valeria breathes, astonished at such arrogance. Desperation makes men careless. Corvus has operated in shadows for so long he's forgotten that evidence can expose him. Outside, more hoofbeats approach, the sound of a full imperial escort. Emperor Trajan has arrived earlier than expected, possibly alerted by his own network of informants to the night's violent events. What do we tell him? Valeria asks, suddenly uncertain how to explain the carnage surrounding them. The truth, Marcus says simply. All of it. The time for partial revelations and careful politics has passed. As imperial guards take positions around the villa, Valeria realizes that everything has changed in the space of a single night. The careful game of investigation and evidence gathering has become open warfare, with Corvus willing to murder Roman citizens to protect his secrets. The emperor's arrival will either save them or condemn them, depending on whether Trajan believes their accusations or accepts Corvus's inevitable countercharges of gladiator rebellion and senatorial treason. Emperor Trajan surveys the aftermath of the assassination attempt with the cold calculation of a commander assessing battlefield casualties. His imperial escort secures the villa's perimeter while he examines the evidence personally: the poisoned blade, the written orders, the distinctive markings that tie the attack directly to Corvus's household. General Marcus Aurelius Maxentius, he says finally, using Marcus's full military title for the first time. I wondered when you would resurface. Your death was reported with unusual haste 3 years ago. Caesar, Marcus responds, offering the formal salute of a Roman officer. My death was greatly exaggerated, though not through any fault of my own. So I'm beginning to understand. Trajan holds up the signed murder order, studying the handwriting in the lamplight. Senator Corvus has grown either very desperate or very careless. Perhaps both. From beneath his military cloak, the emperor produces a leather satchel containing rolled maps marked with official seals. The documents bear the distinctive red wax of the Imperial Intelligence Service, reports that have clearly been gathering for some time. Your suspicions about military corruption weren't entirely unique, General. We've been investigating unusual patterns in our Germanic campaigns for the past year. Too many ambushes, too many convenient intelligence failures, too many heroic last stands that accomplished nothing except high casualty counts. Marcus studies the maps, recognizing terrain from his own campaigns. Red marks indicate battle sites where Roman forces suffered unexpected defeats. The pattern is damning, a clear trail of betrayed operations stretching back over 5 years. These locations, Marcus says, pointing to specific marked positions. I knew most of the commanders who died here. Good men, experienced officers who wouldn't have walked into obvious traps without reliable intelligence telling them the areas were secure. Intelligence that ultimately traced back to senatorial briefings attended by Corvus and his associates, Trajan confirms grimly. But proving deliberate betrayal rather than simple incompetence required someone with first-hand knowledge of how these operations were compromised. Caesar, I have more than knowledge. I have evidence. Marcus looks toward Valeria, who nods her encouragement. Hidden in Corvus's private villa are correspondence with barbarian chiefs, payment records for information sold, detailed maps showing planned Roman movements. Everything needed to convict him of treason. Hidden evidence does us little good if we cannot access it legally. Which is why we need to force Corvus into making another mistake, Valeria interjects. He's already shown his desperation by attacking us directly. If we pressure him correctly, he might expose his entire network trying to protect himself. Trajan considers this, his weathered features reflecting decades of political and military experience. What do you propose? A public confrontation, Marcus explains. Announce my resurrection officially. Demand a Senate hearing on the circumstances of my supposed death. Force Corvus to either flee Rome or attempt a more elaborate conspiracy to silence us. And if he chooses the latter option? Then we'll be ready for him. But this time, we'll have imperial protection and legal authority backing our investigation. The emperor walks to the window, gazing out at the approaching dawn. His decision will determine not just their fates, but potentially the exposure of corruption that reaches throughout Roman military command. General Maxentius, he says finally, I hereby restore you to active duty with full rank and privileges. Lady Valeria, you and your household are under imperial protection effective immediately. The pronouncement sends relief flooding through Valeria's chest, but Trajan isn't finished. However, understand that this protection comes with expectations. I want every piece of evidence you can gather, every name connected to this conspiracy, every detail about how Roman intelligence was sold to our enemies. And I want it all presented in a manner that will stand up to senatorial scrutiny. Yes, Caesar, they respond in unison. Corvus will undoubtedly claim this is a fabrication designed to restore a dead general's reputation. He'll argue that desperate gladiators and ambitious senators have conspired to create evidence where none exists. Then we ensure the evidence is overwhelming, Marcus says. So comprehensive that even Corvus's allies in the Senate cannot ignore it. As imperial guards take permanent positions around the villa, Valeria realizes that their small resistance movement has suddenly become an official imperial investigation. The protection is welcome, but it also means that failure is no longer an option. If they cannot prove Corvus's guilt beyond doubt, they'll face charges of treason themselves. There's something else, Trajan adds, his voice dropping to a more private tone. Intelligence suggests Corvus isn't acting alone. We believe he's part of a larger network that includes other senators, possibly even members of the Praetorian Guard. The scope of the conspiracy continues to expand, reaching into the very heart of Roman power. What began as a quest for justice for one murdered tribune has become a battle for the integrity of the empire itself. How much time do we have? Valeria asks. Not long. Word of tonight's events will reach Corvus within hours. After that, he'll either run or fight. Based on his personality, I suspect he'll choose to fight. The betrayal comes from the most trusted source. As dawn breaks over the villa, Gaius approaches with a sealed letter in his weathered hands, his expression torn between shame and desperate necessity. The loyal freedman who has served their family for 30 years trembles as he extends the document toward Valeria. My lady, he says, his voice barely audible, I must deliver this message and beg your forgiveness for what it contains. Valeria breaks the wax seal, immediately, recognizing Corvus's distinctive handwriting. But the content shocks her more than the source. Detailed information about their plans, their conversations with the emperor, even Marcus's exact location within the villa. Information that only someone with intimate access to their household could have provided. Gaius, she whispers, the letter trembling in her hands. How does Senator Corvus know these details? The old man's face crumbles as decades of carefully maintained dignity collapse under the weight of confession. My lady, he holds my grandson. Little Marcus, named for your brother. Corvus's men took him from the streets 3 days ago. The revelation hits like a physical blow. Gaius's grandson, barely 10 years old, has been leverage all along. Every plan they made, every strategy they developed, has been reported directly to their enemy through the man they trusted most. Where is the boy now? Marcus asks, his voice controlled but dangerous. From his cloak, Gaius produces a second document, a confession letter written in his own careful script, detailing every conversation he has overheard and reported. The paper shakes in his hands as he offers it to them. Corvus demands that I sign this confession, admitting to fabricating evidence against him under your coercion. In exchange, he promises to release my grandson unharmed. And if you refuse? Valeria asks. The boy dies. Corvus was very specific about the consequences of defiance. Marcus studies the confession letter, recognizing the trap it represents. Gaius's testimony would undermine every piece of evidence they've gathered, providing Corvus with a perfect defense against imperial accusations. This confession claims that you helped us forge the military correspondence, that you planted the assassination orders on the dead assassins, that the entire conspiracy is our invention. Yes, General. It would destroy your credibility completely while clearing Corvus of all charges. Emperor Trajan emerges from the villa's main house, having overheard enough of the conversation to understand the situation. His expression reveals the calculating mind that has survived decades of imperial politics. A grandchild as leverage, he observes coldly. Corvus understands Roman family loyalty very well. Caesar, Gaius says, falling to his knees, I have betrayed my oath to this household and endangered the empire itself. I deserve whatever punishment you decree. You deserve nothing but sympathy for an impossible choice, Trajan replies. But your grandson's safety doesn't change our need for justice. What are our options? Valeria asks. Limited, Marcus admits. If Gaius signs that confession, Corvus can claim vindication. If he refuses, a child dies and we gain nothing. Unless, Trajan says thoughtfully, we use Corvus's confidence against him. The emperor moves to the table where the confession letter lies, studying its contents with renewed interest. Gaius, when are you expected to deliver this signed document? Before midday, Caesar. Corvus is hosting a gathering of his political allies this afternoon. He wants the confession ready for immediate presentation to the Senate if needed. Perfect. You'll deliver exactly what he expects, but not what he wants. Trajan calls for writing materials and begins drafting a modified version of the confession. His version maintains the basic structure Corvus expects while subtly altering key details that will expose rather than exonerate the senator. This document will appear to clear Corvus while actually providing evidence of his guilt. References to specific operations he couldn't have known about without guilty knowledge, mentions of communications that we can trace, details that will trap him in his own lies. But my grandson, Gaius protests. If Corvus realizes the deception, we'll never have the chance. Imperial forces are already moving to locate and rescue the boy. We've been tracking Corvus's safe houses since yesterday. As if summoned by the emperor's words, a Praetorian guard arrives with urgent news. Caesar, we found the child. Corvus was hiding him in a warehouse near the docks. The boy is unharmed and secure. The relief on Gaius's face is overwhelming, decades of worry lifting in a single moment. But Valeria recognizes that Corvus's escalating desperation makes him even more dangerous. If he's willing to kidnap children to maintain his secrets, she says, what won't he do when he realizes we've outmaneuvered him? That, Marcus replies grimly, is exactly what we're about to discover. The trap is set, the false confession prepared, and Corvus's overconfidence about to become his downfall. But as they prepare for the final confrontation, all of them understand that desperate men make dangerous enemies. The afternoon sun blazes mercilessly as Corvus's trap springs with devastating precision. Marcus, being transported to the Colosseum under heavy guard for what was supposed to be a staged demonstration of imperial favor, finds himself instead facing a death sentence when the escort suddenly turns hostile. "Change of plans, General," sneers the lead guard, revealing himself as one of Corvus's bought men. The Emperor's protection doesn't extend to unfortunate accidents during prisoner transport. The ambush unfolds with military precision in the narrow streets leading to the arena. Corvus has positioned archers on rooftops, blocked escape routes with overturned carts, and surrounded Marcus's escort with twice their number of armed mercenaries. But the senator has made one crucial miscalculation. He's forgotten that Marcus Maxentius didn't earn his reputation through political maneuvering. In the chaos of clashing steel and shouted orders, Marcus breaks free from his ceremonial chains and seizes a gladius from the first guard he drops. The narrow street becomes a battlefield as he fights his way toward the Colosseum, leaving a trail of Corvus's hired killers in his wake. Meanwhile, at the Senate House, Valeria plays her part in Trajan's carefully orchestrated revelation. The modified confession letter has been delivered as planned, and Corvus stands before his assembled political allies, confident that victory is within his grasp. "Distinguished colleagues," Corvus announces to the gathering of senators, "I have here documented proof that recent accusations against my person are entirely fabricated." A signed confession from the freedman who helped create false evidence under coercion from desperate conspirators. He unfurls the confession with theatrical flourish, beginning to read aloud the carefully crafted words that Trajan designed to trap him. But as he speaks, his expression gradually changes from triumph to confusion to growing horror. This confession details knowledge of Operation Desert Wind. He reads, his voice faltering. References to communications with Chief Arminius regarding autumn patrol. Mentions of payments received through the merchant Gaius Balbus. The assembled senators lean forward, recognizing names and operations that were never supposed to be public knowledge. Corvus realizes too late that he's reading his own condemnation, but stopping now would only confirm his guilt. Emperor Trajan emerges from behind a marble column where he has been listening to every word. In his hands, he carries the sacred war standard of the 10th Legion, the eagle-topped staff that Marcus once followed into battle, now serving as a symbol of Roman honor betrayed and restored. "Senator Corvus," Trajan says, his voice carrying absolute imperial authority, "please continue reading. Your colleagues are fascinated by these details about military operations that officially never existed." The silence in the chamber becomes deafening as every senator present realizes they are witnessing either the exposure of massive treason or an elaborate imperial conspiracy. Corvus's face cycles through desperate calculations as he searches for escape from the trap closing around him. "Caesar, this document is clearly fraudulent. These operations, these names, they're inventions designed to implicate loyal Roman citizens in imaginary crimes. Then you won't mind if we verify these imaginary details with the actual participants?" Trajan gestures, and imperial guards escort a procession of witnesses into the chamber, German prisoners who recognize Corvus from previous negotiations, merchants who handled his payments, even Roman soldiers who survived the ambushes he orchestrated. "Impossible," Corvus breathes, watching his carefully constructed web of lies unravel in real time. But his moment of shock gives way to cold calculation. If exposure is inevitable, survival requires eliminating the primary witness. His hand moves to the hidden poison ring, but instead of using it on himself, he signals to supporters planted throughout the chamber. "Seize the pretender," he shouts, pointing at empty air where Marcus should have been standing. The gladiator who claims to be General Maxentius threatens the emperor's life. The accusation is desperate nonsense, but it creates enough confusion for Corvus's allies to draw concealed weapons. What should have been a formal senatorial proceeding explodes into armed conflict as loyalist guards clash with corrupted officials throughout the marble halls. In the melee, Corvus makes his break for freedom, but Trajan's voice stops him cold. "Senator, you're forgetting something important." The emperor raises the legion standard, its golden eagle catching the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. "General Maxentius isn't the only witness to your crimes. I am." The revelation that the emperor himself possesses direct knowledge of Corvus's treachery strips away the senator's last desperate hope. There will be no escape, no political maneuvering, no corruption of justice. You have a choice, Trajan continues as imperial guards surround the trapped senator. Face judgment with whatever dignity remains to you, or force us to drag you before the people of Rome in chains. Corvus's hand hovers over his poison ring, and for a moment, Valeria thinks he might choose the coward's escape. But pride, the fatal flaw of his class, makes the decision for him. I am a Roman senator, he declares. I will face whatever accusations you bring. The armorer's hammer rings against bronze and steel as Marcus prepares for what may be his final battle. In the depths of the Colosseum, away from the roaring crowds above, he stands fitted for custom armor that combines his military heritage with hard-learned gladiatorial experience. Each piece is crafted not just for protection, but as a statement of identity reclaimed. The breastplate bears the eagle of the 10th Legion, polished bronze that catches torchlight like captured sunlight. Shoulder guards curve to deflect blade strikes while allowing the fluid movement that kept him alive through 50 arena contests. The helmet, designed to his specifications, protects while ensuring clear vision, a general's practicality married to a gladiator's necessity. It suits you, Valeria observes from the shadows, watching as he tests the armor's flexibility with practice movements. You look like the man you were always meant to be. I look like a man caught between two identities, Marcus replies, adjusting the sword belt that holds both his traditional gladius and the longer spada favored by cavalry commanders. Neither fully general nor gladiator, but something new. Above them, the sounds of preparation echo through the amphitheater's corridors. What began as a simple plan to expose Corvus has escalated into something approaching civil war as the senator's supporters refuse to accept his guilt and demand armed resolution of the accusations. Emperor Trajan enters the armory with grim news etched across his weathered features. Corvus has called upon his allies throughout the city. 3 cohorts of the urban guard have declared for him, claiming I've been deceived by elaborate forgeries. How many loyal forces do we command? Marcus asks, his military mind immediately assessing tactical situations. 2 Praetorian cohorts, the German guard, and perhaps half the city garrison. Roughly equal numbers, but Corvus holds better defensive positions. And his endgame? Simple. He's declared that I'm unfit to rule due to senility and corruption. His supporters claim the right to protect Rome from an emperor who believes the lies of gladiators and conspirators. The magnitude of Corvus's desperation becomes clear. Rather than face individual judgment for his crimes, he's attempting to overthrow imperial authority itself. The battle for justice has become a battle for the empire's soul. Where will the confrontation take place? Valeria asks. Here, Trajan replies, gesturing to encompass the Colosseum around them. Corvus has demanded trial by combat, claiming divine judgment will reveal the truth. He's probably hoping his superior numbers will overwhelm our position before justice can be served. Marcus examines his reflection in the polished bronze of his breastplate, seeing not just his own face but the ghosts of every soldier who died because of Corvus's betrayals. Then we give him exactly what he's asking for. The afternoon sun slants through the arena's upper levels as both sides prepare for confrontation. Corvus's forces control the main entrances and much of the seating area, while Imperial troops hold the arena floor and the underground passages that Marcus knows from his gladiatorial career. The irony is perfect, Marcus observes as he checks his weapons one final time. The place where I lost my freedom becomes the place where I reclaim my honor. From a hidden compartment in the armory wall, he retrieves a ring of iron keys, simple tools that once represented his captivity but now symbolize liberation for every gladiator still enslaved in the arena's depths. The keys unlock not just cells but the possibility of freedom for all who have suffered under the corrupt system Corvus represents. You're planning to free the other gladiators, Valeria realizes, understanding the significance of the keys. Every man down here knows what it means to fight for survival against impossible odds. Corvus's hired soldiers are motivated by money. These men fight for the chance to choose their own destiny. As evening approaches, the sounds of approaching conflict echo through the stone corridors. Trumpets announce the arrival of both armies, while the crowd that has gathered, citizens drawn by rumors of gladiatorial combat involving real political stakes, fills the amphitheater with tension. Whatever happens, Valeria says, adjusting the ceremonial purple cloak that marks her as under imperial protection, remember that you're fighting not just for justice, but for the future we plan together. And you remember, Marcus replies, touching the keys at his belt, that some fights are worth winning regardless of personal cost. The final preparations complete, they emerge from the armory's depths into the dying light of afternoon. Above them, 50,000 Roman citizens wait to witness a confrontation that will determine whether corruption or honor prevails in the heart of their empire. The arena that made Marcus a slave is about to make him free or kill him in the attempt. The Colosseum fills with an energy unlike any gladiatorial contest in its history. 50,000 Roman citizens pack the stone seats, drawn by word that spreads through the city like wildfire. A senator accused of treason will face divine judgment through combat, with the empire's future hanging in the balance. In the imperial box, Emperor Trajan sits with calculated calm despite the armed rebellion unfolding around him. Corvus's supporters control 3 sections of the amphitheater, their weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun, while loyalist forces maintain defensive positions around the arena floor. Citizens of Rome, Corvus declares from his commandeered section of seating, his voice carrying across the vast space, you witness today the exposure of corruption that reaches to the throne itself. An emperor deceived by gladiators and conspirators seeks to destroy loyal senators based on fabricated evidence. The crowd stirs uneasily, uncertain whom to believe. Political theater in the arena is unprecedented, and the stakes feel dangerously real. From the gladiator cells beneath the arena, Marcus emerges with the iron key that will change everything. The simple piece of metal, worn smooth by countless hands, represents more than access to locked doors. It symbolizes the choice between slavery and freedom that every man in the cells below faces daily. Brothers, he calls to the gladiators still imprisoned in the depths, his voice echoing through stone corridors. Today we fight not for the entertainment of crowds, but for the right to choose our own destinies. The key turns in lock after lock as cell doors swing open throughout the underground maze. Thracians, Gauls, Germans, Britons, warriors from across the empire emerge blinking into torchlight, hardly daring to believe their freedom is real. Some of you know me as the hooded fighter who won his battles through strategy rather than bloodlust, Marcus continues as the freed men gather around him. Today I ask you to fight alongside me not as gladiators, but as free men defending justice against corruption. The response is immediate and overwhelming. Warriors who have spent years fighting each other for crowd entertainment unite behind a cause larger than survival. They arm themselves from the arena's weapon stores, taking up gladii, tridents, nets, and shields with grim purpose. Above, Corvus realizes his strategic mistake too late. He planned for combat against imperial guards and praetorian cohorts, disciplined soldiers fighting according to military doctrine. He never considered facing an army of gladiators led by a general who understands both conventional tactics and arena warfare. Attack now, he commands his forces, before they can organize properly. But Marcus's years in the cells have taught him the arena's geography better than any conventional commander could know. Secret passages connect different levels, hidden gates allow rapid movement between sections, and the complex network of chambers beneath the floor provides perfect staging areas for surprise assaults. Remember, he tells the freed gladiators, we're not performing for applause. We're fighting for the right to live as free men under just laws. The first wave of Corvus's attack comes from the main gates as hired soldiers pour onto the arena floor in standard formation. They expect to face a handful of imperial guards in open combat on familiar ground. Instead, they find themselves in a maze of obstacles as Marcus triggers the arena's mechanical systems. Trapdoors open beneath advancing feet, releasing wild animals that turn ordered formations into chaos. Elevators rise from the floor carrying gladiators who strike from unexpected angles before disappearing back into the underground network. The arena becomes a battlefield where conventional military tactics prove useless against opponents who know every stone, every passage, every hidden mechanism. "This is impossible," Corvus shouts from his elevated position, watching his superior numbers fragment and fall back in confusion. "They're just slaves and criminals." "No," Emperor Trajan replies, his voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater, "they're free men fighting for justice. Something your hired killers will never understand." In the arena below, Valeria watches Marcus coordinate the battle with the skill that made him legendary. He's everywhere at once, leading charges from hidden passages, organizing defensive positions around key choke points, turning the Colosseum's entertainment features into military assets. But Corvus still holds hostages among the crowd, and his archers command the high ground. The freed gladiators are winning tactical victories while losing the larger strategic battle. "We need to reach Corvus himself," Marcus realizes, studying the senator's protected position. "End this at its source before more innocent citizens die." The key in his hand has unlocked more than prison cells. It's opened the possibility of victory against impossible odds, but only if they can complete what they've started before Corvus's desperation leads to massacre. The parchment feels heavier than gold in Marcus's hands as Emperor Trajan presents the manumission papers that officially restore his freedom and identity. Written in the formal language of Roman law, the document erases 3 years of slavery with a few strokes of imperial seal, but the weight of those lost years cannot be so easily dismissed. By imperial decree, Trajan reads aloud to the assembled crowd still filling the Colosseum, "General Marcus Aurelius Maxentius is hereby restored to full citizenship, rank, and honor. All charges of treason are dismissed, all confiscated properties returned, all debts of slavery forgiven." The crowd's response builds slowly, beginning with veterans who recognize the justice of the proclamation and spreading throughout the amphitheater until 50,000 voices roar approval. But Marcus barely hears them, his attention focused on the legal document that transforms him from property back into a person. "Furthermore," the emperor continues, "let it be recorded that Senator Gaius Cassius Corvus died guilty of treason, his estates forfeit to the state, his name stricken from all honors. Justice has been served in the sight of gods and men." As the official ceremonies conclude, imperial investigators present the evidence they've recovered from Corvus's hidden chambers. Correspondence with barbarian chiefs detailing planned ambushes, payment records showing gold received for Roman intelligence, maps marking the locations where loyal soldiers would die for senatorial profit. Over 400 Roman deaths can be directly attributed to information Corvus sold, reports the lead investigator. Entire cohorts walked into traps because he provided enemy forces with detailed knowledge of patrol routes and defensive positions. The scope of betrayal staggers even those who suspected Corvus's guilt. What seemed like personal vendetta has revealed systematic corruption that cost the empire hundreds of its finest soldiers. What of his co-conspirators? Valeria asks, studying names mentioned in the recovered correspondence. Most have fled Rome rather than face investigation. Those who remained claim ignorance of Corvus's activities. Trajan's expression suggests limited patience for such claims. "We'll determine the truth through careful examination of their personal records and financial dealings." In the quiet moments after the crowds disperse, Marcus finds himself alone with the manumission papers, trying to process the transformation from slave to free citizen. The document grants him everything he lost: property, rank, legal standing, but cannot restore what slavery took from him. "You look troubled for a man who just reclaimed his life," Valeria observes, joining him in the empty imperial box where Corvus died. "I'm grateful for freedom, but I'm not the same man who was betrayed 3 years ago. The experiences of slavery, the things I learned about survival and human nature, they've changed me permanently. Perhaps that change isn't entirely negative." Marcus considers this, remembering the gladiators who fought beside him, men whose courage had nothing to do with rank or citizenship but everything to do with choosing dignity over despair. "The man I was before might have served the empire faithfully but blindly. I understand now how easily good intentions can be corrupted by those who see soldiers as expendable resources rather than human beings." "What will you do with that understanding?" Use it. Trajan has offered me command of the Germanic frontier, the same region where Corvus's betrayals cost so many lives. I want to rebuild those units with officers who remember that their first duty is to the men they lead, not the politicians they serve. The manumission papers crackle slightly as evening wind moves through the arena. The legal language declares his freedom absolute, but Marcus knows that true liberation requires more than imperial decree. There's something else, he says, meeting Valeria's eyes directly. The gladiators who fought with us today, they're still technically slaves. Their freedom isn't guaranteed by my victory. What are you proposing? That we purchase their freedom. All of them. Use the gold from Corvus's confiscated estates to buy every gladiator in Rome and offer them the choice between continued service or civilian life. The proposal would cost a fortune and create administrative chaos, but Valeria sees the justice in it immediately. And after they're free? Some will choose to remain warriors, serving in the legions with honor rather than fighting for entertainment. Others will return to their homelands or start new lives as Roman citizens. The choice becomes theirs to make. As night settles over the arena where so much blood has been spilled for the amusement of crowds, Marcus holds his manumission papers up to the torchlight, reading again the words that restore his legal identity while promising himself that freedom means nothing if it isn't shared with those who helped achieve it. The document that grants him citizenship also grants him the power to extend that same gift to others, transforming personal liberation into a principle that could reshape how Rome treats its most vulnerable populations. 6 months later, dawn breaks over Rome with the golden promise of transformation. In the villa's garden where this journey began, Valeria tends roses that bloom more vibrantly than ever, their roots nourished by soil that has known both sorrow and renewal. The morning light catches the simple wedding rings on her finger, bands forged from the iron chains that once bound Marcus, transformed through fire into symbols of chosen commitment. The delegation from Germania arrives today. Marcus announces, emerging from the house dressed in the formal attire of a Roman general but moving with the confident grace learned in gladiatorial combat. The combination of military bearing and arena-tested reflexes has made him legendary among the frontier legions he now commands. Are you nervous about seeing the tribal chiefs who once bought Roman intelligence from Corvus? Valeria asks, though she already knows the answer from his steady expression. Curious, perhaps? Corvus painted them as savage enemies, but I suspect they're simply people trying to protect their lands and families, much like us. The peace negotiations that Marcus proposed have drawn representatives from across the Germanic frontier, chiefs and war leaders who participated in Corvus's conspiracy, now facing the man they thought they had killed. But instead of vengeance, Marcus offers something unprecedented, honest dialogue about coexistence. Emperor Trajan arrives with a small escort, his informal visit marking how much their relationship has evolved from ruler and subject to trusted collaborators. In his hands, he carries a scroll containing the latest reports from the gladiatorial reform program that has spread throughout the empire. Remarkable progress, he observes, reviewing the numbers as they walk through gardens where former slaves now work as free employees. 1,200 gladiators freed in the past 6 months, with over 80% choosing productive civilian occupations. Even the arena managers admit that free fighters perform better than enslaved ones. People fight harder when they're protecting something they value rather than simply avoiding punishment, Marcus replies, a principle he's applied to both gladiatorial reform and military command. Speaking of which, your Germanic campaigns have been unusually successful. Fewer casualties, better intelligence, improved relationships with local populations. Treating soldiers as valuable human beings rather than expendable resources tends to improve their performance. Revolutionary concept. Trajan laughs, recognizing the gentle irony. Your reports suggest the tribal leaders are genuinely interested in peaceful cooperation. They're tired of war, especially now that they understand how Corvus manipulated both sides for personal profit. Without his poisonous influence, we're discovering that Romans and Germans have more in common than either side realized. As if summoned by their conversation, the Germanic delegation arrives, a procession of warriors and chiefs who dismount with the careful courtesy of people determined to prove their peaceful intentions. Leading them is Arminius the Younger, nephew of the legendary chief who once destroyed Roman legions, now seeking alliance rather than conquest. General Maxentius, Arminius says in careful Latin, offering the formal greeting between equals, "My people are honored to meet the man whose death we mourned and whose resurrection we celebrate." Chief Arminius, Marcus replies in fluent Germanic, surprising the delegation with his linguistic preparation, "My people are honored to welcome guests who choose words over weapons." The negotiations that follow establish precedents that will influence Roman frontier policy for generations. Trade agreements replace raid and counter-raid, cultural exchange programs substitute for military campaigns, and joint patrols protect both Roman and Germanic settlements from common threats like bandits and wild animals. This treaty wouldn't have been possible while Corvus lived, Valeria observes during a break in formal proceedings. His profit depended on maintaining conflict between your peoples. Which is why such men are more dangerous than any external enemy, Arminius agrees. They poison the possibility of peace from within. As evening settles over the villa, the former enemies share a feast prepared by cooks who were once gladiators, served by staff who chose employment over slavery, in gardens tended by people who work for wages rather than whips. The transformation extends beyond individual lives to reshape the fundamental relationships that define Roman society. What comes next? Valeria asks as they watch their guests prepare for departure, treaties signed and friendships established. "We build on what we've started," Marcus replies, his arms circling her waist as they stand together watching the sun set over olive groves that have witnessed so much change. Every freed slave who chooses dignity, every treaty that chooses cooperation over conquest, every person who decides that honor matters more than profit, they all contribute to something larger than any individual victory. The wedding rings catch the dying light, their iron surfaces polished smooth by months of wear. What began as symbols of bondage have become emblems of liberation, proving that even the heaviest chains can be transformed into something beautiful when shaped by love and determination. In the distance, a cardinal settles on Martha's rose bush, as if delivering final approval for changes that honor both memory and hope for the future.